Well, thank you for coming to today's kind of make-up Dean Speaker Series for Cybersecurity Week. We have a panel here of two cybersecurity or security professionals that will be doing kind of a QA session, and we'll take questions from the audience as we move through the process. But let's go ahead and get started. So we have Frank and Ralph here. So Frank, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Frank Limardo. I'm currently the head of information security at Nikola Motor Corporation. That's here in town. If you guys don't know what the company is, we are manufacturers of semi-trucks, but they're battery electric, or we're going to be doing a hydrogen fuel cell late next year. So we're trying to do our part for climate change and zero emissions and all that kind of stuff. I've been in cybersecurity for 20-something years. Spent a lot of my time as a professional in the military, did 23 years in the Air Force. Most of that time, was spent in cybersecurity arena. And so I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to answer questions. I love talking about this kind of stuff, so don't be afraid to ask any kind of questions you want.
My name is Ralph Hume with National Intelligence Services. Been doing investigations, owner of National Intelligence Services. Been doing investigations with cyber about 30 years. Started out doing tracking people, stuff like that about 30 years ago, and just kind of done it ever since. I was brought along with National White Collar Crime Center about 30 years ago to critique their CyberCop 101. Just kind of got the niche from there. I started out doing forensic analysis on hard drives when they're only about 1 gig big, and then went from there.
So from cybersecurity, when I was younger, we never heard of cybersecurity. I don't think anybody grew up wanting to be. We wanted to be fireman, we wanted to be policemen. What do you want to be when you grow up, and what was the changing point in your life? What was the thing that said, oh, I do want to be cyber? Maybe it was the military. You said you were in the military, Frank?
Yeah, I was. So, yeah, cybersecurity didn't exist when I was growing up either. Even the idea of information security, IT security, right, didn't really exist in the early 90s. So in the Air Force, it's you kind of do what the job you get is the one they tell you, right? And so I started out my career in logistics. Actually, I did that for about 4 years, and I liked it, but I knew that that's not what I wanted to do for a living. And so I just had an opportunity to get into something that we called information assurance, which again is back then the Air Force's version of what cyber is today. So I was lucky to get that job. I applied for it. I was lucky to get it, and I haven't looked back since. And it's been a really good journey. And I've not done anything outside of cybersecurity since then. So since like 1999, 2000, something like that.
So you've been doing it for 20-some years then?
Yeah, long time.
And in the Air Force, obviously, you hadn't done this before. So they were teaching you. What kind of things did they teach you the first? What they put you in a class, or did they say, "Here, look at this," and you had to figure it out?
Yeah. So back then, everyone in IT was lumped in just IT, and so I learned how to be a server admin. I learned how to be an exchange admin. I learned how to fix computers, and then once we got to, once I got to my base, that's where sort of the hands-on learning began, because people there had sort of taught themselves security, and the concept of it again was very different than it was today. The things that we were doing, very different. But yeah, it was a lot of just kind of try it and see what happens, and it was the wild west back then. We did our best back then.
So Ralph, your path's a little bit different, right? I mean, you were not heavy into the cyber. You're more on the security side of it, or I know you're doing kind of everything, but
Mine was less network, more hands-on as far as the direct computer itself. I learned how to, in the 70s, I was learning to teach myself programming as a kid, and slowly as I grew up and went to college, I was learning more electronics than I was computers. I was a natural computer, I don't know if you say a whiz, but I was learning computers on my own, and I put a Macintosh network together for the college, writing center, but it wasn't a formal class by any means. Went in the Navy. I was in the Navy for about 6 years. I was a police officer in the Navy. Got out and didn't know what I wanted to do. I don't know why I didn't naturally just go to computers. I should have. I regret it now. I've been a lot farther than I am now. But I went to the writing lab. I was doing an English 101 report, and saw somebody in the writing lab. They're on the computer, and I'm like, "What are you doing over there?" What she was doing, I was more interesting than what I was doing. She kept noticing. She goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I just want to see what you're doing on that screen there. It's the internet." You know, I'm not aging myself here, but I'm like, "Can I take a look at what you're doing?" She goes, "Yeah, come over here." She says, "I was going to go get a latte," and I didn't know what a latte was either. So she took me for a vanilla latte, and we became friends. But so we're drinking lattes, cruising the internet, and that's it. My English 101 paper is an F. And so I started cruising bulletin boards and all these other things. I went home. I took over my mom and dad's computer and started dialing into bulletin boards, started learning the ins and outs of hacking, really. And then I started tripping over these people on the internet that were getting they were getting cyberbullied. People were getting their emails, stuff like that. They were getting harassed, and I wanted to help them. And so I started learning how to hack people that are being bullies, and so using ICQ, stuff like that. People would challenge me, saying, "Oh, you can't find me," quit harassing the harasser, stuff like that. And I would find out within a reasonable area where they're at, and then I got a kick out. So I became a cyber cop, so to speak, and it just went from there. Sorry, here I am.
So, so both of you are military then. You said you were in
I was in the Navy,
Navy and Air Force, right?
Air Force, yep.
So, I think a lot of people that I know in cybersecurity have come through the military pathway, but I'm guessing that's not the only pathway. I mean, do you hire people that are only military, or do you like is anybody with that background? And what skills do they need to have to be successful in the field?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, obviously, I have a soft spot for any veteran. I did almost 24 years, right? So that's the vast majority of my life has been spent in the military. So I got a little soft spot for veterans. But you're right. That is not the only way, especially nowadays, right? Like, GCU's got a great cyber program. ACU's got a pretty good cyber program. My son is up in NAU. Don't judge me. They've got a pretty good computer program, right? So there's lots of ways to do it, and I think that for me, what I look for is someone who's got problem-solving skill set, someone who's not afraid to someone who's comfortable with being uncomfortable, if that makes sense, right? Because in the security world, no one day is the same as the next, and so you really have to be flexible. You really have to be willing to just go that extra mile, knowing that you don't really understand exactly what's going on every single second of the day. So there's a lot of ambiguity, and I think I'm going a little off topic here, but there's a little bit of ambiguity there, and there's a little bit of just the unknown. And so the right skill set, in my opinion, is someone who's not afraid of that. There are some people who absolutely need a very rigid sort of minute by minute, hour by hour schedule. To me, that personality is a tough. You would have a tougher time in security. Doesn't mean you couldn't be successful. It just means I think it'd be a little bit of a uphill climb for you, because it just changes, and you never know when you do an incident management or incident response, you just don't know where it's going to take you, and all of a sudden you think, hey, I might have a bean on this guy, and then all of a sudden it's, well, now I'm looking at a completely different set of servers or a completely different set of logs, and trying to stitch it all together. So lots of ways to get into the field. There's not one true path. I think having a background in IT absolutely will help trying to get a cybersecurity degree, and that's whether you work the help desk, whether you have a home lab, whether you go on Udemy and learn and learn just whatever they teach, or whether you get certifications. You got to have some kind of something, and then guys like me will just teach you the rest.
So from your perspective, again, you're maybe not quite as here's a little different role what you do for your piece of it. So what skills are you looking for when you're working with somebody?
I think somebody that can think outside the box. Somebody can think outside the box. It's good to have a groundwork of set some skills. Obviously, you have to have to be able to build off of. But being able to think outside the box is the biggest skill, and communication. there's too many people out there that can't communicate. You can't communicate, and that goes all throughout life and anything. But you can't communicate, you're not going to get anywhere. And that's written and verbal. There's not, in 30 years of doing investigations, there hasn't been one case the same. There hasn't been, whether it be a computer investigation or whether it just be a general investigation. I've got recent cases that just scratch my head that people can't see the issues, but just the same, they're not the same as a case I might have had 10 years ago. I think that having a ground, the certifications and everything else, I think are a great lead into what you want to do in cybersecurity, but I think that you need to go beyond that. You need to get the real life application. You need to continue reading. I think you need to get the internships and everything else that will expose you to the real life situations. They only can prepare you for so much.
So I went and talked to a bunch of early freshman classes in cybersecurity or networking and IT, and you ask the question of what they want to be when they grow up, and pretty much everybody wants to be a hacker. Is that the right mentality? Is that what you want? Do you want somebody who's got the ability, that wants to go out there and break into some stuff, or do you want something different?
From my perspective, that's a completely different set of skills. And so there's an entire industry dedicated to that, right? There's an entire industry dedicated to what we call, white hat hacking, right? You're doing it as a good guy. You're not a bad guy. You're not trying to break into things, to steal things, but you're trying to expose vulnerabilities and expose a company. And again, that's a completely different area. Now, is that cybersecurity related? Absolutely, because you have to know what I'm looking for as the defender in order to be more successful to go on offense, right? So I don't think that's the wrong mentality to have. I just think you put yourself in a very small sort of box with your ability to do different things if that's the only thing you want to do. But if you're passionate about it, I'd say go for it. I mean, do it. There's lots of ways to get into that. It's cool. I mean, I want to be a hacker too, but
So do you look for people that are more on the offensive side, or do you like working with people on that side of it, or do you on the opposite?
I think hacker is a glorified term. I think that it's been Hollywood's given it such a glamorous picture that it's ridiculous. I think hacker is such a vague term that you can label so many things to it. Hacker, my perspective, up until recently, the last few years, hacker's always been a negative term to me. It's always been somebody that was a criminal. Now, not so much. It's got a black side and a white side to it. But I think that hacker is you have a white hat hacker, black hat hacker, and that's fine. I think a hacker is, the person I've been chasing up until the last 2 years. I'm only chasing half of them, I guess, apparently. I think that a hacker will be, in my eyes, I'm always questioning that big question mark, is a white hat or black hat. But I think that there's always going to be a need for a white hat hacker. I've been chasing hackers for 30 years, and the thing is that you need good internal security. You need good internal security, and you need network security. You need good practices in-house. You need good personal security. And you're always going to have people challenging it. And, that's the bottom line. But as far as hackers go, I just think it's a glorified term.
So we'll ask I'll allow you guys to ask questions after one more here, so start thinking what questions you have. So cybersecurity is more than the technical part. We talk about social engineering. We talk about physical security. What keeps you up at night? Are they all equally dangerous, or is one more scary than the other ones?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. What keeps me up at night, honestly, is the amount of things I don't know that's what keeps me up at night, right? I can only buy so many tools. I can only have so many people, but there's always going to be something that lurks out there that's, you know, bigger, faster, smarter than my team and me. And so that's really what keeps me up at night. I mean, if all things being equal, my job is really not to prevent a hacker, whatever we want to call them. I don't prevent a hack, right? I make it as difficult as possible to be hacked, and then I go into risk management. And so what I look for are things like, you know, what we call a company's crown jewels. So think about, you know, what every company's got information or software or something that makes that company valuable. So I'm going to spend a lot of money and a lot of time and effort protecting that. But then as you kind of go out from that, you know, cybersecurity is expensive. Cybersecurity personnel, we get paid well. Cybersecurity tools are very expensive. And so if I can reduce the amount of risk to an acceptable level, meaning, okay, I know that there are some vulnerabilities that I just can't do anything about, but really if I'm exposed by it, there's only so much damage that bad guy can do, then I'm okay with that, right? So it's really just about mitigating risk, making it difficult, putting up things to make it a little bit harder, because really, if you're gonna, it's like, if you're gonna go after my company and it's very, very difficult to get into my company, and there's a similar company and it's pretty easy to get in that company, well, you just have to run faster than the guy next to you, right? Like, the bear's going to catch somebody. As long as it doesn't
that
catch
joke's
you.
been around a while, right?
Yeah,
You just got to run faster than this
you
next
just gotta
person.
Yeah, that's kind of the approach that you have to take, because otherwise everything is just mind-boggling scary, and that's not a good place to be.
As far as I go, the cases that I go home scratching my head on, that I'm trying to figure out how an intruder got into a client, and those aha moments, like, wait a minute, I think this is it, and then wondering if I should call my client at 2 o'clock in the morning, going, I think I figured it out. It's happened a lot, and sometimes or putting a test to it. Lately, for example, I've imaged hard drives recently and trying to figure out how somebody got into a network, and it's testing situations or undeleting files, or trying to recover a hard drive, or different things, trying to figure out where somebody put data or where they got information from. More times than not, it was some human that spoke it as opposed to some data that went through an email. It's difficult, but it's those aha moments that people think you're crazy because you're awake all night and your client's sleeping sound. They know you got it for them, but it's those moments that I enjoy my job, and I'm glad that the clients depend on me for it. But those times where I finally figure the puzzle, I see my cases as puzzles, and I like it when I solve them. And so when I figure it out, and I guess when it's so calm and quiet and nobody's bothering me, that's when I figure it out. But that's pretty much it, the aha moment, when I think I figured the answer.
Yeah, technology is a lot about those aha moments, whether you're programming something or trying to figure out how things happen, or the next generation or the innovation part, all seems to be aha moments. So any questions from our audience at this point?
Yeah.
So the question is, with the difference between product security and corporate security.
Yeah, that's a good question. So corporate security to me is sort of your traditional security approach, right? I'm worried about laptops and desktops and servers. I'm worried about, I've got a firewall in place. I've got a governance process in place. Sort of all the things that you probably learn security. Where I think product security gets more specific to what do I do on that specific thing, whatever the product is, right? So I'll give an example. In our company, our vehicle is considered a product in our company. And so I've got a group of people whose sole purpose in life is to make sure that that product, that vehicle, is as secure as possible. And that's all they work on. So they're not going to worry about firewalls. They're not going to worry about you know, our antivirus tools. They're not going to worry about any of that sort of, again, traditional stuff. It's only, you know, is that product secure and ready for consumer purchase, really is what that piece is. So I think it's really just the focus. You know, and it depends on what your line of business is. So if you're a software company, right, the product security team is going to really be focused on, can something specifically in the code be exploited, versus the person who's doing corporate security is worried about, hey, is the environment in which that code is being developed secure? Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
So I have a question. Your trucks. I mean, I'm guessing there's all kinds of sensors and things that need to be tracked and monitored that makes that product probably like a Swiss cheese of potential holes. So is part of cybersecurity from your perspective, I mean, are you corporate cyber or are you also doing security for the trucks themselves too?
So today my main responsibility is corporate. However, the individuals that are doing cybersecurity for the trucks, they, you know, we work together. I'm lucky that I've got a great set of engineers over there. The company's got a great set of engineers over there. So we'll collaborate on where we can, because they're like any good professional, they're worried about their environment as well. And so we work hand in hand there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the way we're, you know, the way that it works there is that everyone on the product team reports up through the product management. And so there's a chief engineer who ultimately has responsibility. But because it's cybersecurity and it does affect what I do, I still have some of that responsibility, some of that reporting responsibility, those kind of things.
And Ralph, when you're investigating something, I'm guessing you have to talk to a lot of different people, whether it's somebody who's responsible for the product side, corporate side, physical security side, social side. Do you see any one of those being more important? Like, where do you go first? Who's the first one you talk to when you're investigating something?
It depends on the situation. I mean, I've had some big corporations, oil company. I've had an oil company where I've talked to executives at an oil company where data has been leaked out, customer information or employee information has been leaked out. So I've talked to executives, and once upon agreed to, that I've dealt with their executive security. Automotive. I've dealt with automotive where I've dealt with their executive teams. So it's making sure everybody's on the same wavelength as far as what's going to be dealt with and what the information is going to be put out, and then figuring out exactly what happened and getting to interview each individual that was involved to make sure that I know exactly what's going on. Recently, there was a tire company here in Phoenix that I dealt with, and there was some product that was stolen, and so getting to interview everybody involved and making sure that I had the cooperation that I needed. Initially, I wasn't getting the cooperation I needed, so I had to ring them back in and do that. So it just depends on the situation. But when it's a company-involved asset, you want everybody involved, in the executives specifically, because it's, you know, their name on the line also. You don't want it to tarnish that, or you don't want, you know, that to come into play or that be jeopardized. So.
Yeah, and actually interesting to say that, because we were talking before we kind of got started today about what happens after you have a break-in. So Target, we were talking Target specifically, that they had a kind of a more meager starting point, and after now they got a whole building of cybersecurity people of it. So are you seeing more from your bosses or companies that they're more supportive of the need to do this? They understand the risks that go along with it? Or are we still fighting a battle that until something happens, they're not going to put any effort behind it?
I can say it's gotten a lot better. You know, but security is still seen as sort of a cost center, right? We're still seen a little bit as it's an added expense that we have to throw on to an already expensive thing. But honestly, it has gotten better. So again, years ago, security was a complete afterthought. I mean, if you got to a point where you thought about security, then you were lucky. And so it's evolved, and we still have a long way to go. There's this concept of security by design, which you know is a concept that everyone's familiar with. but actually doing it is a different story, right? And so that's kind of what I see my job in a company is too, is to make sure that we're at least talking about it. It's in the conversation. People are aware. You know, cybersecurity at a company level, at a school level, at your house, whatever. It's everyone's job, right? There's a cybersecurity team that's dedicated to doing things for the company or whatever, but it's every single employee has got responsibility. Everybody who's got to log into the network or to a device has got some responsibility. And that's kind of where I see where I fit is that I make that known. I'm an advocate for it. I can speak to it all the time, you know, and then the people on my team are the ones, you know, they're the miracle workers who are actually doing, you know, hands-on keyboard, you know, battling the fights, you know, and I'm kind of there just to make sure that they've got the tools that they need, they've got the support that they need, and that's I really like doing this part of my job now. I really like being in this position now. I loved being in the trenches back in the day, but I kind of get to see the bigger picture now, and I kind of get to have those types of conversations, which is what I really enjoy.
So the question I understand is, do you have to worry more about your employees, or do you have to worry more about people outside your company?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question. I would say that for the last 5 years at least, the number one vector into a breach has been email. Why? Because it's cheap. It's easy. I can easily send out 10,000 emails, and I just need one person to click, right? That's all I need. I don't need 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 of you. So email is easy, quick, cheap. Almost anybody can do it. I mean, there's some, it's not, almost anybody can do it, right? You just go on YouTube and you can figure out how to do it. So for me, that's a lot of user, and there's not much I can do from a tooling perspective, right? There are tools in place that will filter emails and that will, you know, block links and all that kind of stuff. But again, people are getting very smart with their underlying programming, so that they're always defeating our tools. And again, all it takes is one person to click on a link, and then we could potentially be on fire. So to combat that, there are tools in place, but it really is about user training, employee training, having those conversations, you know, making it valuable to them, not just from a company perspective, but from a personal perspective, right? So my approach is always, hey, I want you to be cyber safe everywhere. I want you to be cyber safe at home. I want you to be cyber safe when you're on vacation, because I think that's going to correlate to being cyber safe at work. And I'm also trying to get actually away from the term cybersecurity, because that sounds so rigid and scary and like, security. I don't want to talk to security, right? Like nobody does. It's like one of the principles. But when I start saying, hey, I'm just about cyber safety, like people are like, oh yeah, okay, cool. I'm saying the same exact things to them. I'm just approaching it in a different sort of way. And so,
Fluffy.
yeah. So people, you know, people are the biggest concern when it comes to IT, because we're human. And so where I can automate things, I automate them. Where I can put a tool in place, I put a tool in place. But I still have to have conversations with employees about the dangers of the internet and how scary it can be, and you know, without trying to scare you away from getting online or doing your job or whatever, right? Obviously, I can't do that. But yeah, it's humans they're our biggest problem.
Let me speak to that once. Friday, I got a call from a client I haven't had contact with 5 years. He's a Department of Defense contractor. His accountant on her laptop at home got a malware because she got an email and she clicked on it. And it says, your Microsoft license is not adding up, and please call us immediately. Do not do anything on your laptop. So he called me. He goes, we can't get a hold of our IT person. Can you take a look? So sure enough, she clicked on malware. And so I went and grabbed the laptop. Actually, it's in my car right now. But so it's just something simple like that. Just takes one click. You're done. So it doesn't take much. So
What other questions do we have? So the question is, what knowledge or skills do you think are going to be more relevant in the future if they're not necessarily right now? And I'm going to add on a little take to that. So we've had cybersecurity professionals come in and say, cybersecurity students need to know how to program in something, whether it's Python, that was the one specifically they mentioned, but what skills are important for cybersecurity today, tomorrow, down the road, and is a programming skill important?
Yes, programming skills is definitely important. Do you need to be at the same level as a software developer? No, because there are a lot of simple things from a scripting perspective that you can do that's just going to help automate your job. You know, getting back to automation, you want to automate as much as possible. I think any technical skill you can bring to the conversation. You know, again, if you were an exchange administrator, or if you were a help desk technician, you just did desktops, or if you know, anything technically related, I think I can convert into a very good cybersecurity analyst, and then you can branch off from there. In the future, what I think needs to happen is I think that a lot of people get into IT with the understanding that they're not going to have to deal with employees. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're just going to be able to sit in a room and do their job and kind of just go home. And that's, at least on the security side, that's 100% false, right? And so you need to have the ability to speak to people. And I know that sounds weird, but you do, because you're going to have to go up to people. You're going to have to do some sort of investigation where you're talking to a fellow human being, and you got to be able to have that conversation and be able to ask tough questions and be able to understand what they're saying. And the reason I'm saying that you need to have the skill set is because you really need to practice that. Because I think, again, we can, with today's technology, there's like zero reason for me to leave my house, right? I mean, I can have everything delivered to me. I can, there's no reason for me to talk to another human being. I could go days. But that's not a very effective cybersecurity person in my perspective. So work on your people skills. Get out there, make yourself a little bit uncomfortable, because that's the only way you kind of get practice with it. You know, I tell my son all the time, you know, he's in an environmental sustainability program, but I've told him he should just join like a different, you know, a different club that's outside of environmental, right? Because he can talk environmental stuff all day, but he has trouble talking about, you know, politics, or he's got trouble talking about whatever. So go join a club like that and just practice and get better at, again, just talking to human beings.
So Ralph, what makes a good investigator?
Communication, also the cloud, Python, definitely good things to have. I was watching a video on the auto industry this morning, coincidentally. Do you realize 20% of the vehicles out there are in the cloud? They're driving around, 20% are in the cloud. That's pretty scary. 20% of the vehicles, that's pretty significant. 1 out of 5 cars are on the internet. So that's something to think about. So anyway, good communication, being nosy. You know, I think OSINT's very handy to have. Open source intelligence is very handy to have. If nothing else, you come across a system, profile a system, you need to figure out what weaknesses that system might have. You need to know where to find them. I think public records, knowing public records and what's available online, that's handy too. If you're getting into various systems or profiling people, profiling companies, stuff like that. I think those are important skills to have from an investigator standpoint. I think that knowing, I know library is going virtual, but still knowing how to use a library is very important. I think that we've gotten away from that, but you can learn a lot from a public library. You can, you know, books. Don't stop reading. I'm constantly reading. Sometimes we can't find time to read, but definitely need to read. I wouldn't stop reading. So Elon Musk realized he's reading 3 books at a time all the time. At least 3 books at a time. Man, it's pretty smart. So built his own rocket. Come on. You gotta hand it to the guy. It's pretty smart.
Yeah, let me add one thing. So you mentioned cloud. that is a good skill set too, right? And that's kind of where that question went from. I do like to focus on the human side because I think, again, IT people just have, in general, difficulty with the human being aspect of it. But to your point, that's a very good point. Python's is a great programming language. Every single major cloud, so Google, AWS, Azure, they all have fundamental certifications. I wouldn't even necessarily get the certification, but if you know fundamentally how the clouds work, you're gonna be head and shoulders above somebody who does not. And so, because that's where everything's going to the cloud. 20% of cars today, it's going to be 50, 60, 100% in your lifetime. We're not going to go backwards, right? And so, any cloud fundamental courses that you can take, I would suggest taking.
So kind of staying on that same topic, almost most of our industry partners come in here and say that we're looking for the communication, the inquisitive, ability to go out and just learn stuff on their own. So when somebody comes work for you or potentially wants to be an investigator, college is providing what, 20% of the starting and you're providing the 80% as they on board, or is it the other way around? Where is most of the education coming from? When they start your role or before they come into your role? This was not a question I had. So I gave them some pre-canned questions. So this one's a little off the cuff. So I'll give them a chance to think about this one for a second.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, there is no... Well, cybersecurity today is definitely there's a more clear path to it. Again, you can get a cybersecurity undergrad, you can get a graduate degree. That's a very clear linear path. I would expect, if I was in a program like that, to work in cybersecurity. That would be my expectation. I would say you would probably have, probably about 20-30% of what you need, and then it's going to be on the job. Because again, going back to our previous conversations or our previous questions, no 2 days are the same. I mean, again, I can teach you how to use a tool fundamentally, but if you don't understand what this log entry means versus what this log entry means, and how each of those might be related, but have you go off in two different directions to then later correlate those back. You can't teach that in college, right? That's just really someone understanding that, going through that process, hopefully documenting it so that it makes it a little easier for the next person. I love that cybersecurity is getting the love from colleges that it is today, because again, it didn't exist. I mean, this is relatively new in the grand scheme of things. So I think we'll see more and more people with that specific degree, which will make life a little easier. But to break it, if you don't have college though, and you don't have any sort of IT experience, meaning you haven't worked a help desk or an admin job, it is extremely difficult to get into cybersecurity, extremely difficult. And part of the problem is guys like me, who've been in it for a long time, will say, hey, we have such a shortage of cybersecurity people. And then we're also asking for, entry level 3 years worth, 4 years worth of experience. Come on, right? And so guys like me who are in a position to be able to build teams have to be able to go, I'm going to accept that this person does not have specific cybersecurity experience, and we're going to train them, and we're going to teach them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a great way to grow a team. And that's the approach I take whenever I can. I love people in your positions who are just trying to learn, trying to do better, and trying to understand. Because I could talk about this stuff all day. You know what I mean? I could spend all day just talking about how a tool works and why it's important and what we expect from it. And so I think we should not be afraid of getting people in who just want to. If you want to do it, come on, I'll hire you. Yeah, really. I mean, honestly.
So Ralph, we don't actually have degrees called Investigator. So okay? So tell us what that degree would look like.
I think you get the basics. I think you get the basics when you're researching for a report. I think you get the basics when you're learning to go to the online library. I think you should go to a physical library personally, but I think you get your basics in college. I think you're getting your 20%. I think that I can take anybody and make them an investigator if they listen. But I think somebody has to be curious, and I think IT people have that curiosity, especially want to be hackers. I think they can be they're curious. People that are pen testers, they're looking for that. You know, they like the puzzle. They like that. They got that curiosity, looking for the nooks and crannies of the weaknesses. I think they've got that intuition. I just, you know, and I speak to a lot of people. I've spoken to people in this center where I think I'm going to be a pen tester. Or I'm going to be I want to do forensics. You know, they want to get locked into that one field, and I always tell everybody, don't get locked in one field. Don't get locked in one field, because you may find yourself in a rut. You know what Dale Carnegie said: the difference between a rut and a casket is a casket with both ends kicked out. You don't get yourself cut in a rut. Have more than one skill set. I've been certified in computer forensics, but it's not my only skill set. And it was a long time ago. I can do computer forensics, but if I depend myself on computer forensics, I'd be a poor man. I'd really be a poor man. So make sure you have more than one skill set. Make sure that you've got a lot of training in different things. Don't just depend on pen testing. Do other things also. Make sure you broaden your horizons. And I think that will be a good thing for you.
What other questions do we have?
Can you speak on the importance of documentation? A lot of students stage like tools that look like that.
So the importance of documentation.
It really is the cornerstone of any good program, because there's a lot of reasons, but mainly because you're not always going to be there to do it, right? Your main job is X, Y, or Z. Cool. But you're on vacation, or you leave the company, or whatever. And so that knowledge has to be transferred over to somebody. That's one piece. Second piece is, I think when you're forced to document something, you're forced to see what it is that you're doing, and then you can capture sort of the pieces that you don't need to do. Like, why, this is a very inefficient 10-part process. Why? I can take out this piece and this piece and that piece, right? But you don't know it unless you actually document it, because people sort of have an understanding of how things work, and then when you actually document it, you realize the two oftentimes don't match. And when you're going through any sort of assessment, so if you have a third party coming in and assessing your program or your tool or whatever it is, it's like the third question. It's in the top 3 questions they ask you. All right, what tools do you have? How many people do you have working on the program? Where's your documentation? Or something along those lines. It's always going to be asked. And so if you're not doing it, it's a very awkward conversation. And then you have to juggle a reason why you didn't do it. And, I've never heard of a good reason not to document. Now, it is a pain in the butt. It is. I'm not going to lie. It is. No one really wants to do it. But I think if you just put that time in the front end, it's just going to pay off on the back end, because you're going to forget that, again, you're doing something. You're going to forget why you're doing something, and you just go to that documentation and go, oh, yeah, I forgot. There is a server that's sitting in this warehouse, not on campus, that I need to remember when I'm trying to figure out how I'm getting hacked externally or whatever it is. So it's really, really important. It's very difficult to do. It's tedious. It's time consuming. Nobody likes it. I've never met anybody who's like, I love documentation. I wish that person exists. So if any of you guys love documentation, I'm hiring.
Yeah.
No, it really is. It really is. It really is super important. I mean, just from a foundational perspective, you have to know what you're doing, and you have to be able to share that with somebody or the team. It reduces your time it takes to train people, because you literally say, here, look, here are all the steps you need to do this. Go forth and prosper. When you have a question that's not addressed by this documentation, come find me. So it frees up time and energy, and it's just good in my perspective.
Your notes are your legacy. Period. You didn't write it, it didn't happen. That's what I've always been drilled into me for years. I think, especially doing, like I'm doing a forensic analysis of a 500 gig hard drive, it is easy to get lost. doing forensic analysis of a 500 gig hard drive. You don't write notes. You come back to the 500 gig hard drive. You're lost. You don't know what directory you're in. Don't know what file you're looking at. You're done. And you have a mad client because they don't know when they're going to get the results back. Your notes are your legacy. You got to keep good notes. You don't know when it's going to show up in court. And they have to be accurate. You have to be able to put your hand up and say, I swear upon this Bible, this is true. Notes are your legacy. Make sure they're accurate. Make sure they're true. Make sure they're legible. Make sure they're English. Make sure they're not misspelled. Spell check them. Or use your Grammarly. Wherever's out there now. It's important stuff. There's so many things out there that make it easier. Even speech to text now. I mean, God knows. There's so many things that make it easier for you now. So make it happen. So that's all I have to say about it.
So one of our deans is back here. I think we need an emphasis in documentation, cybersecurity with an emphasis in documentation. Maybe we need to go that direction. But
Those students would get hired. And I mean, in a heartbeat, they'd get hired. Every company.
And we do have a lot of writing in our cybersecurity program, and students are probably wondering why. I think you just got validation of why they have to write those papers, because they do have to spell check, grammar, put their thoughts in logical order. Now, interesting you said Grammarly, because when I'm speaking into something and it's going on Grammarly, that's on the cloud. So if I'm documenting passwords and user credentials, that's probably not a good thing, right? Or am I missing something?
Well, you shouldn't be documenting your passwords.
Okay, good. I'm glad we got some clarification.
Yeah.
At least not on, yeah. Don't do that. No, but that's a good point, right? So that point in knowing your environment and knowing where that information is ultimately landing is a pretty big part of cybersecurity too. Oftentimes we find that answer in documents. Somebody documented that, hey, we've got this blob in Azure and we've got this S3 bucket in AWS, but the IT teams don't know that because nobody told them. But then when we go do an investigation of some sort, they go, like, how come you didn't read this documentation? Well, I didn't know it existed. But then we read the documentation, we're like, oh, okay, cool. And so if it's not documented, then again, I can't be expected to protect everything if I don't know what everything is. And if it's not documented, it makes my job just that much harder.
So is a network diagram, is that considered documentation?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
We have time for one more question. Who's got that last question for our panel? So hold on, let me repeat the question so you can record it here. So from threat intelligence, what kind of skills or knowledge and experiences are important? Is that correct?
Personality profiling is a big one. Paul Ekman, look up his works. Paul Ekman, if you ever watched the TV show Lie to Me, that was based on his works. Paul Ekman's an excellent doctor in psychology. But Lie to Me, the TV show, you haven't seen it? Get it. It's like 4 seasons, I think. Interesting TV show, but that was based on his work. But personality profiling is a big thing. I actually used it. I was turned on to personality profiling by an ex-CIA case handler in Chandler. I don't remember how I crossed his path or how he crossed mine, but we had lunch one time, and he turned me on to personality profiling. The CIA uses it to determine whether they can turn somebody over for an asset. And so I started researching it. I used it on cases. I went undercover a couple of times as a private investigator on cases, and I read people like books. So for example, we got a second here. I had a guy that ripped off clients for $9 million in the islands for a resort. And so I knew this guy was very arrogant and liked to voice his knowledge and everything. So I went to Vegas and met this guy as a negotiator on behalf of the investors. And when I sat down with them, I said, you know what, let's set this stuff aside for a minute. I'm going through a divorce. I have $3 million I need to hide. You seem like a smart guy. Could you help me hide it? Well, of course I could. So he told me all of his contacts at all the banks. Turned around and told the FBI where all these banks were, and they got almost all $9 million back. I played right into him. He played right into me, and we got all our money back, almost all the money back that was gone. Personality profiling, psychology. That's a big one. Psychology and personality profiling. Really look into stuff like that. It will help you a lot in threat analysis. I don't think it's pressed enough. You really should do that.
Okay, we just got like a minute or two left. So what kind of last minute advice do you have for our here audience, the ones that'll be watching this online? And if you have anything, like if you have internships or openings or anything like that, that'd be a great time to share that too.
I think my parting words of wisdom is to be curious, right? Don't ask questions, right? That's a great question. I don't know what you personally think threat intelligence means, but it's going to be a little different than what you think today, right? And as you talk to people who are experienced in it, you can figure that out. So be curious, ask questions. Don't be afraid to try and fail and do it again, because that's how you learn. And these are all sort of cliche things, but honestly, as an old guy sitting up here, I can tell you that stuff works. There's a reason why you've heard it 10, 15, 20, 30, 40,000 times in your lifetime, because it actually works. Don't be curious. Don't be afraid to fail. Keep going. To your intern questions, we do have internship programs. I am not the best person to be able to answer questions specifically about how that program works. But if you're interested in it, you can absolutely contact me, and I will put you I'll put you in contact with the person who knows way more than I do about how internships work for Nikola.
As far as I go, I don't have internships, but you guys see me around campus every so often, and feel free. You can talk to me anytime you want. I can refer a lot of stuff to you. If you need help with stuff, feel free. You can contact me anytime. I can give you my card. I have some cards with me if you want it. Other than that, that's pretty much it.
Well, thank you both for taking time out of your day to come to GCU and share with our students here and online. And we look forward to involving in future conversations we have or different panel discussions. But thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I'd love to come back and chat.